Hey guys, it's a beautiful fall day and we are here setting up our fruit forest. So once I ordered my ridiculous amount of fruit trees this year, Kevin and I set up kind of a chart here. We've plotted where we want our trees to go. We've plotted their mature size to ensure that as they grow, they don't block each other's sunlight. So what we need to do today is to translate this picture to the ground. How we're doing that is we've run a square line off of the house. As you can see, that's this first line here to what I'm going to call my baseline tree. So this tree from this second straight line is going to determine where all my new fruit trees are going to go. So we've set up our baseline, that's this one here, and we're going to be measuring where all our trees go. So follow us along.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you want to be. Step 4.
So we've already marked our first 6 trees, and if you'll notice from the time-lapse video, I keep running back to this tree. So this cherry tree right here is our benchmark tree. What we've done is we've determined that this one is the easiest tree in the yard, or the easiest landmark in our yard to measure off all of these new trees. So every time Kevin is going down the string line to take a length measurement, I am coming back to this cherry tree. So each time that we make the mark, you'll see Kevin has made a tick and he's told me how many feet this is. So this will make it easier when our trees arrive next week to grab them, look at our chart and say, oh, this guy is 22 feet down and 22 feet across, and I'll be able to place him there. Now, if you come along here, you'll notice we've made a mark at 32 feet. Kevin has set up the square against the string line here so that we know that this line coming out of here is straight. Because what can happen is you can measure off of what you think is a straight line and you're kind of doglegging a little bit. So it's important to use a square, especially if you've put in the time and the effort to make something like this, which is pretty, in our opinion, pretty accurate to what we want our food forest to look like.
Everybody just do your thing. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up.
Today is Food Forest Day 2. You can see Kevy over there in the skid steer. We are at our neighbor's house. They had a mulching company come through and mulch up a bunch of trees that the previous owner left on the property, and now they have wood chips they don't know what to do with, and we know what to do with them, right? So we are over here scoring some sweet free wood chips. I'm pretty excited about that. As you can see, we have marked these ones at 64, 68, 70, 78, and also 86, but we have our mulch in the way. So what we're gonna do is we are going to, probably the first day, get our first trees in, and that would be all of these ones that we've already mapped. And then once those guys are in, chances are that a good chunk of this dirt pile and this mulch will be used up. So we'll be able to mark the rest of our trees. It's tree day here in Alberta. So Kevin and I, after a couple of shipping delays and some miscommunications, we finally have our trees ready for our fruit forest. I guess we would have liked to have these trees a little bit earlier in the season because it is starting to get quite cold at night. But we're going to work with what we got. What we're going to do is actually take a few measurements of the trees so we can kind of track their growth. What I want to measure is the height, the span, and the trunk size. This is going to help us to kind of keep tabs on our trees' growth, and over the years it will help us to identify what things are working for what trees and what maybe isn't working for their growth and their production. The next thing we're going to do after we measure all of our trees is we're going to take a paint marker and we're going to label each of the pots with the number corresponding to our plot plan that I showed you previously. So what this will do is it'll make it really easy for us when we go to plant. So if this one is number 26, I'll write 26 on the pot, and then when we go over to the food forest, we'll be able to plunk this guy right in spot number 26, and it'll be ready for us to get planting.
Good day, wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. Yo, set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do.
We're gonna put in our first tree. So according to our site plan, this tree and this marking is a hascap. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to gently take him out of the pot. Just squish that a little bit. And I'm gonna look at the roots. Now this guy, he's looking a little root bound in this pot. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put him in my bucket of water, and I'm just gonna kind of let it soak a little bit so that we can get rid of some of this dirt, so we can kind of open up these roots and see what we're working with. So while I do that, my main muscle guy, he's gonna dig my hole.
I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to...
So right now, Kevin is digging us a hole that is about 2.5 times as wide as the pot that the plant came in. And we are going to be digging, I assume probably down to the clay for this one, because we have landscaped all of this area and placed dirt on top so that we could lay sod. But due to drought 2021, the sod didn't happen. So we're just gonna be digging our hole while I soak these roots and try and release some of this soil here.
One thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Soaking my little hascap tree, and all I'm doing is kind of just agitating the roots a little bit because we're doing a late fall or like a fall planting and the weather is kind of already quite cool. What I want to do is keep as many of these roots intact as possible, but I'm trying to free them from the potting soil that was already in the pot. And then what we can do is kind of spread the roots out so that the tree roots will kind of grow out and away from the plant instead of try to go down into the clay.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Our tree is now in. You can see we've leveled it off with this fancy shovel handle here. So it is good to go. We are ready to backfill. We have tamped our dirt, everything is good. Our tree's in. We've checked the level with this high-tech tool here, the old shovel handle trick. So now we know the bottom of the shovel handle is level with grade. So what we're going to do is double check. Everything looks good. The bottom of the shovel handle is about the same height as the grade, which is where we want our tree to be backfilled. So what we've done now that the roots are teased and the potting soil is mostly gone is we've kind of spread out the roots as much as we could without damaging them. And we're just going to kind of backfill this guy, and then I'm just going to water him. So while Kevin is backfilling, I just want to make a note that we are not amending this topsoil. We want this tree to grow into the dirt that it's already in. There's conflicting theories on this, and a lot of people say that amending the hole in which you put the tree will cause the roots to kind of stay in that same hole because the soil is maybe a little bit more nutritious there or like better suited for it. So we haven't amended the hole. We're just using the same dirt that came out.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. So life ain't easy, yo. I think there's a reason though. Ups and downs.
So Kevin took his time watering this little tree here, and you can kind of see how he built a little bit of a berm around it. This is just to help keep in some of the water while it's a juvenile tree. It's soaked all the water in already, so what we'll do now is we're going to look to make sure our soil is still at the right level, covering all the roots, and then we're going to water it again.
Just like every different season, yo. Sometimes I'm high, other times I'm barely breathing, though. I always gotta fight and hide from the demons, yo. Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flaws, so here come the clouds.
On our last tree that we planted, we used a bucket to soak the roots of the small haskap tree. Unfortunately, we can't use that method with this big tree here. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully remove it from the bucket, and we're going to lay it flat on the ground, and we're going to just use the hose to just spray away the soil as best we can. So what I'm going to do is hopefully my muscle guy comes over here to pull this thing out of the box for me.
They'll never stop unless I can.
You can kind of see with this one, because it is a little bit of a later season tree, it's a little bit root bound down here. So what we really want to do is to loosen up this soil so we can open these roots so they'll be easier to spread for us. Again, because our trees, we want their roots to spread out. You can see that I'm actually doing this project on a tarp. That's just going to keep our work surface a little bit cleaner. We also have our tarp on an incline so that the water drains away from where we need to be working.
All the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken. I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence.
After all of our spraying, we basically have now what looks like a bare root tree. There's a little bit of work to do here. Some of these roots are a little bit twisty, so we're gonna maybe clean those up a little bit. But we're using the same method here with our high-tech tools. We're gonna check to see our hole depth, and this hole is a little bit too shallow, so we're gonna excavate a little bit more to accommodate this larger main root here. And then the remainder we will just be spreading through the hole and hoping that our tree grows out and at 'em.
You grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause it's
We are now deep enough. You can see the bottom of the handle here is the same height as the roots on the rootstock down here. Now, what you might be asking, why are we going through so much effort when we can just shake the roots free and shove the ball in the hole? Well, part of it is that I want to avoid as much root pruning as possible, because these young white roots are where the majority of the water uptake and the growth is going to happen. Yes, these woody roots are important because they send out smaller roots, but these small roots, I want to keep them intact for best chance of growth and success with this tree. Let's get planting.
I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, really gonna rise in the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing. Let's go.
In this hole, we are planting our low-scape chokeberry or aronia tree. As you can see, I took the hose to the root ball and I cleaned up all the dirt and soil off of that came in the planting pot. Now what I'm going to do here is spread all the roots around the tree to give it the best chance to grow outwards and increase the surface area that it has to absorb water and nutrients.
Won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket. I ain't playing, got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shoot tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for a long time. Get up, nah, I ain't a quitter. Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer.
Standing here on this bare clay, this was kind of what we had planned as the transition area between the yard where we were supposed to put sod this year and kind of an unused space at the time. Then we got the brilliant idea that we should have a food forest, so here we are. So right now, because this is lower than the remainder of these trees that we have planted here, we're gonna have to bring in some fill with the skid steer. So we'll be filling this up, and then we will be able to plant the remaining trees without having like a huge drop or like a huge swale, I guess, right in the middle of the food forest.
Send the song to the highest bidder. Got juice, got gas, I'ma move fast. New shoes, new tracks, like who's that? I'm new, come back better than last. Yeah,
it's day 2 of food forest planting day, and we are out here just kind of getting ready and rolling this morning. It was pretty chilly last night, so we took a few steps because we didn't get all of our trees planted. So I'm just gonna kind of show you what we did yesterday here, and we will carry on from there. Last night, before we called it quits, Kevin and I made sure to water in our trees really well, and we actually spread some, not all of the mulch, but we spread some mulch around the base of the trees, again to help protect them from the cold, because it was pretty chilly last night. So you can see that the 5 trees we did yesterday are all done. And what I did with my remaining trees over here, you can see, I left them in the pots and I just dug holes in the dirt pile here. And what I did was I just placed the pot into the dirt and I kind of backfilled the dirt, and I also watered them in pretty good. I did this to protect the roots. So these trees, while they're cold hardy, the roots are very susceptible to frost damage, especially if they're sitting in a pot on the surface. So I just kind of dug them in there just to give them a little bit of extra protection. And so those guys are ready to plant today. And then this morning, before I came out, Kevy was out here and he backfilled a little bit more of this soil here. So when we were making our transition between the yard over on this side here and where we wanted the majority of our food forest to go, we did kind of come down a little bit too far. So Kevin came in and he backfilled it a little bit with some clay and he tamped it down nice and tight. We're ready to go. I mentioned earlier that you might think it's a lot of work and it's kind of pointless to tease the roots apart for all my trees. So I wanted to show you a good example of why we do this. So these blueberries, I bought 10 blueberry plants earlier this season, and I knew I wanted to move them, so I was lazy and I made like a mound, like a trench or a mound, I guess, and I planted my blueberries in some nice soil. Now, you can see exactly what happened. Nothing. The roots have not really gone beyond this root ball. So, I mean, for this purpose, it worked great because I was able to easily pick them up and transplant them. But if you're gonna leave your tree or your bush or your whatever there for a long period of time and you want it to grow and establish, you really need to loosen up the root ball, because this is what's gonna happen to your tree. These grew, they produced berries, they looked great, but they didn't grow into their environment. So that's why we're doing all this extra work.
never gonna look back. I'm never gonna look back. 'Cause damn, I was built to last. You move slow and I move fast, and that's facts. Only I can make a change. Slowly take a step today. I will never be the same.
This is another great example of why you should, at the very least, try to take out some of the potting soil from your tree. And you know, using our method, it's pretty easy by just spraying the roots off. It's a little time consuming, but it's definitely worth it. So you can see with this one, the nursery had this tree buried up to here. Well, the base of this tree is actually down here where these big roots are. So we want to make sure that we're planting at this level, not at this level, because this can cause a lot of issues for your trunk. It can cause girdling of roots, which is when the roots wrap around the trunk and choke off the tree as they grow. It can rot the trunk. It can affect the bark. So it is important to know what you're working with when you are planting trees. So there's another great example of why we take that extra step.
That's what it takes. I take shots to the top, I'll get it. I got one life, I'ma do all to win it. I do what's right, pushing till I fall. I'm slipping to get back up, always stand tall, I'm grinning. I got cuts real deep in bruises. never gonna look back. Cause damn, I was built to last. You move slow and I move fast, and that's facts. Only I can make a change. Slowly take a step today. I will never be the same, cause that's what it takes.
And there we have it, all finished. Ellie's just doing the finishing touches. This will be our food forest next year. Just planted all the trees and shrubs, 32 in total. That was a couple days worth of work.
It's been a few days since we finished our food forest, and I'm out here doing a little bit of a project recap. So this was a big project for us. Out here we have very heavy clay soil, so this meant a lot of work to bring in soil. This meant a lot of work to bring in the mulch. We've also have a very hilly landscape. We basically live on top of a hill and it all slopes down towards the lake behind me. So Kevin put in many hours in the skid steer bringing up grade so that our trees, although it doesn't really look like it, have a little bit more of a level space. So you could see in some of our time-lapse videos how we were bringing in soil to make, I guess, soil pods around all of our trees. And our hope is that as the mulch decomposes, it will create its own soil within and in between those kind of soil pods that we made. So I guess today my plan is to go through and pull all the tags off the trees. I kind of left them on there because I was pretty tired by the time we finished planting so many trees. So I will be pulling the tags off. I'm going to amend my site plan. So we talked a lot in the beginning about how important it was to have a plan, right? Like to something to follow. Well, like the best laid plans don't mean nothing, okay? Like we had everything planned to an absolute T. We were so happy with it. And we reviewed it and we tweaked it and we reviewed it and we tweaked it. Then we were like, yeah, this is it. But what we ended up having to do was kind of shuffle some things around. So unfortunately, the nursery shorted me a pretty big tree and we had to kind of reshuffle a lot of stuff because we had taken some of the blueberries that I had purchased earlier in the year, and we were going to be interplanting those blueberries around that big shrub, and it didn't show up. So we kind of tweaked things a little bit. So I will be amending my site map with my tweaks. So some of the trees came in closer towards the main yard. Some of the trees got shuffled completely. So I do want to make sure that I amend my site plan, but that's just goes to show, like, we spent hours working on it and it didn't turn out. It was nice to have a plan for the majority of the trees, but by the time we got to the end and we realized that that tree that we were missing was kind of a big tree, then we were a little bit in a pickle there. So like I say, don't let it derail you if your plan doesn't go exactly as you hoped. It just means it's a chance to improve it on the fly, I guess. So yeah, so I'm going to take off all of my I'm going to take off all of my tree labels. I'm going to hang on to them and I'm going to put them into a binder with a sheet for each tree where I can record its growth. So you saw at the beginning, we kind of marked how our trees were and how their size was because we want to keep tabs on their growth throughout their life. So I think that, you know, I'll just keep the tabs for the trees that I have in that. Probably I'll just put them in a report cover or whatever and go from there. The other thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to get my trees one last good water here. We've had some beautiful, like so good fall weather. I think it was like 15 degrees Celsius yesterday, which is like mind-blowing for the end of October. I mean, Kevin was actually mowing the lawn. Like, it's just gorgeous. So I'm going to give these guys a little bit more water to help their roots establish because they are fall planted trees. And I am going to water my mulch a little bit. So it is settling. We had a little bit of rain the other day and it has settled quite a bit. So we're just going to keep on trucking with that. And yeah, that's it. I guess we'll see you in the spring.